Detroit, Chicago. Remember, Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's a WGN TV Sports Reporter and a 35-year sports media veteran. Please welcome Chris Boden. Program, Chris, great to have you on. How are you?
Good to be back with you. It's been a while, so good to catch up.
Yeah, great to catch up. Great to have you here. What you make of the Bears-Patriots game? First off, we'll start there.
Well, I guess we should probably, it's obviously an encouraging step, but now it's a matter of whether it steps forward or steps backward from this point on. Gaining a little bit of that consistency, because remember how excited we were after the Minnesota game, even though they came up short in that one, just the overall way they performed and got back in it. But then 4 days later, they laid the huge egg at Soldier Field against Washington. And so you're hoping with what was established, what everybody's talking about, what the coaching staff was able to kind of reset and rethink some situations that, hopefully it's something that sticks and they can build off of from there. Obviously impressive when you have 10 days to kind of game plan and make some tweaks. Now that that's on tape, let's see what they can do against one of the best defenses in the entire NFL. Going down to Dallas and having to face that defense. Some interesting questions that need to be raised with, how much they're going to design runs for Justin Fields. It certainly worked. Now that that's on tape, the Cowboys can sniff that out. Are they going to run probably as much as they should with that great pass rush that the Cowboys have as well? So you would think that's the way they're going to be thinking. Now we'll see if they implement that and are able to execute it, which will, certainly be a huge test against that D and Big D on Sunday.
How encouraging was Justin Fields' performance on Monday?
I liked it a lot. But then again, I like the game against Minnesota a lot. So can he start stringing these together? And, I'm not one of those guys where it's all on Justin's shoulders. I think this takes the village. This takes a symphony. And the criticisms will continue for those rough games that he may have from here on out, that he doesn't have enough around him, from the offensive line to a receiver core. But now we just get to see how many steps he can take forward with the group that's around him. I'm not holding my breath in particular that Byron Pringle or I'm just curious to see whether this was never going to be linear. Now he has the equivalent of a full season of starting under his belt. Between last year and this year, it's 17 games. Now let's see if he can become more consistent with footwork, with his progressions, with his accuracy, and, working with the group around him. Yeah, he has some cause for blame if he were to go that far. To me, I think everybody should realize that there's plenty of blame to go around. By the same token, what is Tom Brady doing right now to help Tampa Bay? What is Aaron Rodgers doing right now to help Green Bay? So there certainly has to have a certain amount of responsibility on his shoulders for his development, while also keeping in mind some of the guys that he has around.
Do you think, based on raw talent, he is the guy for the Bears?
I hope so. I think he is. And we have to root for this to happen. I think everybody in town is, because we've been waiting so long for that quarterback. But if he can start making these steps incrementally and show that he is capable of being that starter for years to come, everyone has to root for that, because you don't want to go into next year's draft looking for yet another quarterback of the future. If he can establish himself that way and gain that trust and confidence both in himself and with his teammates and with his coaches and management, that way you can use these high draft picks next year on getting a number one receiver, getting a left tackle if you think you need a left tackle, going out and getting the next Tommy Harris or the next edge rusher. You can use that. If you're not going to re-sign Roquan Smith, where does that leave you at linebacker? So everyone should be rooting for this to happen. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, but I think everyone should try and be in his corner. Now it's up to him to take that development and instill that sense of confidence in everyone.
How'd you feel about the Robert Quinn trade yesterday, too?
Well, he hasn't been that effective. Now, whether that's part of, being double teamed based on what he did last year and the Bears not having that Tommy Harris guy up front, or, the Adewale Ogunleye from years gone by on the other side. of what he had. What was it, Mark Anderson, and who else was in there back in the mid 2000s? But I think it was a good move. Yeah, it's going to hurt the locker room. Ryan Poles admitted as much with the kind of guy that Robert Quinn was. But again, the production certainly wasn't there. This opens the door. Let's see what Dominique Robinson can do. Trevis Gibson, I think when he's been given the opportunities, has really flashed. But, he's been in there on half the snaps, 60% of the snaps. Al-Qadim Muhammad is a guy, one of Matt Eberflus's and Alan Williams's guys from Indianapolis. Let's see if he can step up his production. Maybe there's someone else on the practice squad that they have an eye on and might want to elevate. So the time is now, but just the fact that he only had 1.5 sacks through the first 6 games indicate that it's it's been Robert Quinn's roller coaster career. He's had these off years, bounced back with strong years. This is a down year. I think a good move for the Philadelphia Eagles, and getting a veteran guy in there. And as much as it might hurt the guys on the defensive side not to have him in the room anymore, this opportunity knocks for other guys to possibly step up. And I'm especially intrigued by Dominique Robinson and seeing what he might be able to do with a little bit more playing time, and Gibson as well. So I still don't think we're looking at a playoff team this year, John. So you might as well, at this point, if you can get a return for Robert Quinn, I don't know if there could have been a market any higher than a 4th round draft pick, but it's at least another pick that Ryan Poles can hopefully utilize and turn into something good next year.
Let's play the what if game. If the Bears play like they did on Monday for the rest of the year, could they be a playoff team? I know I'm kind of going on an edge here, but what do you think?
Well, they'll definitely be in the hunt. They're already in the hunt at 3 and 4 for all those other teams that are in the wild card chase, right there with the Packers and who else? So certainly, if they do, they could be. I mean, that would certainly shock the world. Not that I'm holding my breath about that, but this is still a very young team. You're going to have a lot of inconsistency on both sides of the ball too. And, perhaps when you take away a guy like Robert Quinn, what does that do for the defense if other opposing offenses were paying a little bit more attention to him? But I wouldn't mind seeing that. Like the Blackhawks, I don't know if Ryan Poles wants that to happen. If he wants a higher draft he did on Monday night, they can certainly put themselves in a good position come a month from now when the calendar starts flipping to December to potentially be in that discussion.
Chris Boden here on Sports Talk Chicago. Chris, what's your impression of the Bears' new regime and Eberflus and Poles up to this point?
I think overall impressed. Ryan Poles has certainly had his share of bumps with the personnel decisions that he was making early on. The Wgn'S signing, and then a couple of the guys that he brought in who are still on this team, and Adams and Pringle got into some off-field issues as well. So that can come into question. But I think overall, everyone, there were so many holes to fill. I think we talked about this the last time we visited, that no matter which direction you went, if you went and got a wide receiver with your first or second pick there in the second round, where is the defensive backfield right now? Where is the secondary? Is it nearly as strong as it's looked so far, especially when Jalen Johnson is? We've seen what Jaquan Brisker can do. That ceiling is certainly high. I don't think we've seen what Kyler Gordon can totally do yet, but I think week by week, you're seeing steps in the right direction in terms of his reaching his potential, finally getting that pick on Monday night. So no matter what direction they headed in, he was probably going to be open to criticism. He bypassed, I think, some of the sexier needs that there were on this roster: wide receiver, left tackle, offensive line, in order to help Justin Fields. And I think that's what created a little bit more of that criticism of Poles, because he wasn't putting enough good guys around Justin Fields that he's eventually going to need. But he did address, a few areas. Like I say, let's see what Robinson can do. I've been impressed with Brisker so far. I think Kyler Gordon still is going to be a good player. Velus Jones Jr., I'm not sure about that yet, particularly the coaching staff's decision to put him at punt return when he only had 15 of those in his entire college career. So putting him in that position here in Chicago, I scratched my head a little bit about that. He was more of a kick return guy in college. So, they obviously got him out of that position on Monday night. Let's see how long that remains. And, I'd like to just see him take a break from the punt return duties, incorporate him into the offense a little bit more. We still didn't even see very much of that on Monday night. So this is another guy, even though he's an older rookie, you're going to have to try and move along. I think there's potential there for him too, but I think just a little bit overwhelmed by the whole punt returning thing here.
What have you liked from Matt Eberflus coaching wise so far?
I like his directness, his coaching staff. I'm sure you've had other guests come on and say that they certainly make their share of decent halftime adjustments, especially on the defensive side of the ball. There's certainly been some of those ugly first halves that they've experienced. And, it started going a little bit sideways there with the Zappy factor on Monday night in New England, but they've managed to do a pretty good job. Obviously, the big grade here is going to be what Luke Getsy is able to do with Justin Fields, how far he progresses here the rest of the year. I'm a little bit confounded that it took them 6 games and a kind of a mini bye week in order to figure out how to utilize him, to notice that, hey, look what Baltimore does with Lamar Jackson, and utilize him that way. So it's been kind of a tough go for these former Green Bay assistant coaches between Hackett and Denver and Luke Getsy here for the first few weeks in Chicago. But again, he's a first timer in this particular role too. So to me, the most important coach on that staff is Luke Getsy and what he's going to be able to do with Justin Fields from this point on. I think a lot of people might be disappointed that clock hasn't sped up for Fields for the first 6 games, but we've seen a couple of adjustments made, and we'll see if they stick and if he can take steps in growth from here.
Do you think that's going to be sustainable, that sort of Lamar Jackson type offensive approach for Justin Fields and for this Bears team?
A lot will depend on how that offensive line is able to hold up. I mean, who knows what we have this week with Larry Borum and concussion protocol as we tape this on Thursday afternoon. Braxton Jones really going through a trial by fire. You'd hope Cody Whitehair can come back. I think he's got 1 or 2 more games before he's able to come back. Lucas Patrick has been a disappointment, just a bad luck type of disappointment. So if they can keep Justin upright, keep him healthy through the remainder of the season, without him getting too down on himself, which I thought we saw a couple of times earlier in the first month and a half of the season based on the numbers and the performance. I'm certainly hoping it can be sustainable. If they can sustain that run game that they have so far this season as the top rushing offense in the entire NFL, props to them, because that's halfway through your battle. If you can establish that, you can do that this Sunday against Dallas and take that pass rush away by running at a Micah Parsons and at our DeMarcus Lawrence. That's half your battle. If they can sustain that throughout the remainder of the season, that'll be a big step in doing so, because at least gives the opposing defenses something to think about, and hopefully that opens things up in the passing game too.
And for as much as we've criticized the Bears offense, I will say I certainly didn't expect them to be the top rushing offense in the NFL in week 6. That's something that I don't think any of us expected.
Really unbelievable. When you look at the makeup of that line, when this season started, when you had the last 2 5th-round picks as your bookends on the offensive line, and and actually, if you go by the coach's decision, whether it's okay, let's throw these kids in the fire, or whether they have just simply outperformed a couple of veteran counterparts in practice in Schofield and Riley Reef, even though I know Schofield is more of a guard type. But, props to them for having that kind of a start. And, because Lucas Patrick is an undrafted free agent. Sam Mustipher is an undrafted free agent. Cody Whitehair is a former 2nd-round draft pick. So when you look at that conglomeration of putting together the top rushing offense in the league, there certainly ought to be said for that. So again, if they can keep that going, props to them.
How excited are you for this Bears team come next year? I mean, if this year goes the way it could go, maybe 7-10 team, but next year with all this cap space and with what they've done already, what do you expect?
I mean, I would hope that if Fields is the answer, and he keeps progressing, that Ryan Poles, with the cachet and the cash that he has, I shouldn't say cachet, cash that he has coming into the offseason, is going to take a mindset that what we've heard Jed Hoyer say that he is going to do with the Cubs, and that's be aggressive in the offseason, add some big pieces to round up what has been, a fairly young nucleus with more kind of waiting in the wings in the minors as far as the Cubs system is concerned. If you can get enough guys to develop here this season, and that trajectory becomes positive as the deeper the season goes, and whether you find out whether Braxton Jones is the guy, if he can strengthen his base a little bit, if he is your left tackle of the future. Same way with Borum on the other side. If Kyler Gordon continues to make steps in that secondary, and you get a young player or two on the defensive line who is a piece for the future. I think if that progress continues to be made here over the next final 2 months of the season, and they get people a little bit excited, and you're finding some answers for the future, then it should be a fairly exciting offseason with all that space. And the big question hanging into the offseason will be whether they can do something with Roquan Smith. They certainly have the cash to do it if they want. Smith, I think you would probably agree that his season so far has been worthy of a pretty fat paycheck that he might be looking for. Whether the Bears want to go that far or try to get Roquan to have a little bit of meeting ground, that'll be an interesting question. But removing him from the middle of that defense and having to go out and try and find someone else to do the job that he has done so far, at least through the first 7 games, would be a challenge. I think that'll be the first step that Ryan Poles is going to have to figure out going into the offseason.
Chris Boden, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Chris, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, WGN, how did it all come up? You were promoted back in May, I believe.
Yeah, really grateful and humbled that to be a part of that team over there. And I heard through the grapevine that Dan Roan, one of the greatest sportscasters in Chicago history, had been thinking of retiring for a while, and that his time was winding down. So that presented an opportunity, potential opportunity down the road. And so I just wanted to get my foot in the door. When they started GN Sports a couple of years ago, it was about 14 months ago, August of last year, 2021, where they decided to expand it to the weekends as well. It was just Monday through Friday. So good friend and colleague, Bob Vorwald, who oversees a lot of the sports programming at the part-time and per diem, and to especially during the college football and basketball seasons when Dave Ennett, who would fill in every now and then, would be a little bit more tied up. They got me in the door there, and between vacation times and COVID running through the sports office at one point over the holidays last year, I got a whole lot of work. And then it was just a matter of, whether the other bosses, the decision makers, were happy with the job I was doing, and while evaluating who else might be out there. And I was, hoping, praying, and they were answered that I was able to get a full-time opportunity. It's really a great office to work in, from, JP, and now with Caitlin Sharkey coming aboard, along with Josh Friedman, who's just a terrific anchor reporter, along with a great stables of producers, Rick Tarzitano and Joe Libator, leading those guys. It's really a fun place to work, energetic. And what really made me want to get that job even more is really TV-wise, it's the place in town to work right now, with the half-hour show every night, going a little bit more in depth, being able to tell stories. That kind of reckoned back to the day when Comcast Sportsnet was putting on, an hour and a half at least of just recap news programming, not strictly, but primarily focusing on Chicago teams. And that's what we're doing right now. We're the only station in town to do it with this amount of depth and this amount of frequency.
What's it media too? Because you've worked at a lot of different places throughout your career, nationally, locally. So what's it media to now get to WGN and be full-time there?
No, it's great. I mean, when I was a kid growing up back in the day when the Cubs were on, even though I was a South Sider, I'd come home from school and check out the end of the game. There were so many other sports tied into WGN through the years as well. I mean, every team in town, with the exception of, the Bears having national network contracts, every team in town has been on there at some point. I know we don't have the play-by-play programming right now, especially after, the Fire contract ran out. but still, despite that, the fact that we're on every night and talking about it and bringing coverage makes me really excited. And go to a place like WGN. The only place I haven't worked in town here is ABC Channel 7. So I've made the rounds. I've gotten around here in town, and just glad that people are still welcoming me and not turning their TV sets off when the old guy who grew up around here and has been a lifer here can help share them the day's news.
Chris, before we finish up today, last question. I warned you this time, so I hope we have an answer.
And I knew the answer to this one right away.
Okay, what's the best moment you've had covering Chicago sports?
Yeah, and I've been really lucky. I wasn't in Houston or Cleveland for the World Series clinchers. I got to cover some games here in town, but those two teams clinched out of town. I was there for Philadelphia and Boston for the Blackhawks. There are the 6 titles in 8 years and all the drama that went along with it. I was able to cover, I think, I wasn't in LA. I wasn't at the home clincher versus Portland, but for the other 4, I was there for those. But I think the best moment that I had was being on the same float as Jonathan Taves for the 2013 Stanley Cup parade through downtown Chicago. I was able to do some interviews with him, but just to be able to witness the sea of people going through the streets of downtown Chicago and kind of being a small part of the epicenter of that bus that Jonathan and I'm trying to remember whether the Hawks brass at the time was on that bus or everyone was kind of spread out and distributed, but being there with Jonathan, as you know, all the fans were adoring him, and you know, the cup was being passed from a couple of the buses to the other, and to be there, standing right next to him and filming it and being able to interview him while he was raising that cup while thousands of people lined the streets. That was really a cool rush, and that was probably the one moment most, just because it was something the town was already celebrating. They weren't sweating it out. I wasn't going crazy trying to do 10 or 15 interviews with guys who are popping champagne and pouring beer right after they had won a cup. He was just able to let it all loose and celebrate. Was probably the highlight.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me. Best wishes, as always, with WGN, and looking forward to the next time we chat too.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, John.